A private zoo, fleets of private jets, and diamond-crusted handgun, these are some of the possessions of the richest crime bosses in the world. Pablo Escobar. When it comes to wealth gotten through illicit means, there are very few names that are as loud as Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria. Known as the King of Cocaine, Escobar's empire was built on the back of the global cocaine trade, giving him massive wealth. By the time of his death in 1993, Escobar's net worth was estimated at $30 billion, equivalent to about $70 billion in today's money. By the 1980s, Escobar's Medellin cartel was responsible for supplying 80% of the world's cocaine. His operation was a well-oiled machine, smuggling up to 15 tons of cocaine into the US daily, with revenues reaching $420 million per week, equivalent to $22 billion annually. This immense wealth earned Escobar a spot on Forbes' list of international billionaires for 7 consecutive years, from 1987 to 1993. At his peak, he was ranked as the 7th richest man in the world. Escobar's fortune wasn't just numbers on a ledger, it was tangible in his extravagant lifestyle. One of his most famous properties was the Hacienda Nápoles, a sprawling 7,000-acre estate located between Bogotá and Medellin. Reportedly costing $63 million, this estate was a world of its own, featuring a private zoo with over 200 exotic animals, including elephants, zebras, giraffes, and hippos smuggled into Colombia. It also had a bullfighting arena, soccer field, dinosaur statues, and artificial lakes. Escobar also had a collection of luxury cars. The entrance to Hacienda Nápoles was marked by a plane mounted on its gate. Escobar's wealth was so immense that managing it became a logistical nightmare. His brother, Roberto Escobar, revealed that the cartel spent $2,500 monthly on rubber bands to bundle cash. Yet, even with these efforts, much of the money was stored in fields, warehouses, and walls of cartel members' homes. This unconventional storage led to significant losses. Rats chewed through stacks of bills, and the elements rendered much of it unusable. It's estimated that the cartel wrote off 10% of its earnings annually, equivalent to $2.1 billion, due to such damages. In one particularly extraordinary instance, Escobar burned $2 million in cash to keep his daughter warm while the family was hiding in the Medellin mountains. Despite his reputation as a ruthless criminal, reportedly responsible for over 4,000 deaths, including those of police officers, judges, and politicians, Escobar cultivated an image of a benefactor among Colombia's poor. Escobar's wealth funded his philanthropic endeavors, earning him a Robin Hood reputation among some Colombians. He built housing for the poor, constructed hospitals and soccer fields, and distributed cash to impoverished communities. These acts of generosity weren't entirely pure. They were strategic moves to garner public support and loyalty, which proved invaluable in shielding him from authorities. His popularity even extended into politics. In 1982, he was elected to an alternate seat in Colombia's Congress, but his political career was short-lived. Efforts to expose his criminal activities led to his resignation and the assassination of the justice minister who spearheaded the campaign against him. In 1991, Escobar surrendered to authorities under a deal that allowed him to be imprisoned in his self-designed luxury prison, La Catedral. However, after authorities attempted to move him to a standard facility in 1992, he escaped, sparking a massive manhunt. On December 2, 1993, a day after his 44th birthday, Escobar was killed in a shootout with Colombian National Police in Medellin. While his crimes are widely condemned, many in Colombia remember him for his philanthropy. His estate, Hacienda Nápoles, has since been transformed into a theme park, and his life dramatized in countless films, books, and TV shows. Up next is Amado Carrillo Fuentes, a man known for using a fleet of jets to transport drugs. Amado Carrillo Fuentes. Amado Carrillo Fuentes was no ordinary drug lord. He was a legend in the underworld. Known as El Señor de los Cielos, or the Lord of the Skies, he earned his nickname by revolutionizing drug trafficking. Instead of relying on traditional smuggling methods, Carrillo built a fleet of private jets to move massive quantities of cocaine from Colombia to Mexico and into the United States. This wasn't just a few planes. His operation involved dozens of aircraft, making him one of the most efficient and untouchable smugglers of his time. Carrillo started small. He learned the ropes of the drug trade under his uncle, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, and later worked alongside big names like Pablo Escobar and the Cali cartel. By the time he took over the Juarez cartel after assassinating his boss, Rafael Aguilar Guajardo, Carrillo was already a force to be reckoned with. His empire grew rapidly, and his wealth skyrocketed. At the peak of his career, he was estimated to be worth $25 billion, a fortune that would translate to around $40 billion today. Carrillo's influence wasn't limited to the drug trade. He was a master of money laundering, pouring millions into banks, real estate, and front companies. One of his most infamous ventures was his involvement with Grupo Financiero Anahuac, a small Mexican bank. Through this bank, Carrillo funneled nearly $50 million to secret accounts in the Cayman Islands. His investments weren't just about hiding money, they were about power and control. By owning parts of legitimate businesses, he blurred the lines between the legal and illegal, making it harder for authorities to pin him down. But Carrillo's operations weren't without risk. His wealth and power made him a target for law enforcement on both sides of the border. Mexican and US authorities were relentless in their pursuit, tracking his every move. To evade capture, Carrillo constantly changed his appearance and location. He even explored new trafficking routes in countries like Chile, where he acquired luxury properties, cars, and businesses. His ability to adapt and stay ahead of the law was unmatched. Despite his careful planning, the pressure eventually became too much. In 1997, Carrillo decided to undergo extensive plastic surgery to alter his appearance. He also planned to get liposuction, perhaps to further disguise himself. But the operation at Santa Monica Hospital in Mexico City went horribly wrong. Complications during surgery, possibly due to medication or faulty equipment, led to his death on July 5, 1997. Even in death, Carrillo's story didn't end quietly. Two surgeons who performed his surgery were later found dead, their bodies encased in concrete-filled steel drums. Next up is Semyon Mogilevich, a man whose criminal empire stretches far beyond drugs and moves into the world of global organized crime. Semyon Mogilevich, often called the Brainy Don, is one of the most notorious and powerful crime bosses in history. He built an empire that spans continents and involves just about every illegal activity you can think of. He's not just any criminal. The FBI has labeled him the most powerful and dangerous gangster in the world. That's not a title you get by accident. Mogilevich started small, but quickly climbed the ranks of the underworld. By the mid-1990s, he was running a massive organization with over 300 associates spread across more than 30 countries, including Europe, Asia, and North America. Mogilevich's organization was involved in everything: drug trafficking, arms smuggling, human trafficking, prostitution, money laundering, and even high-level financial fraud. One of his big schemes was with YBM Magnex, a company based in Budapest that he used to commit securities fraud. Investors thought they were pouring money into a legitimate business, but Mogilevich was siphoning off millions. When the FBI caught wind of it, they launched an investigation that led to Mogilevich being indicted in the US in 2002. The charges included racketeering, securities fraud, and money laundering, among others. But by then, Mogilevich was long gone, operating from Russia, where he remains untouchable. What sets Mogilevich apart is his intelligence. He's not just a thug, he's a strategist. His nickname, the Brainy Don, comes from his ability to outthink law enforcement and rivals. He structured his organization like a mafia family, with many of his relatives holding key positions. This ensured loyalty and made it nearly impossible for outsiders to infiltrate. Mogilevich is also known for his connections. He has ties to high-ranking politicians, law enforcement officials, and business leaders around the world. In Russia, he's believed to have a cozy relationship with Vladimir Putin. These connections give him protection and allow him to operate with impunity. Even when he's been publicly exposed, Mogilevich has managed to avoid prison, living a luxurious life in Moscow. Mogilevich's wealth is staggering. estimated at over $10 billion. His income streams are as varied as they are illegal. Drug trafficking? Check. Arms dealing? Of course. Human trafficking? Sadly, yes. But what really sets him apart is his expertise in financial crimes. Mogilevich is a master of money laundering, using complex schemes to move dirty money through legitimate businesses and banks around the world. He's also been involved in high-profile scams. He's been accused of manipulating international energy markets, including playing a role in the Russia-Ukraine gas disputes through his control of companies like Rosukrenergo. This kind of white-collar crime requires a deep understanding of global finance, and Mogilevich has it in spades. Despite his wealth and power, Mogilevich is known for being fiercely protective of his family, especially his daughter, Dasha. Stories of his brutality in shielding her from harm are legendary. He has 9 sons who are reportedly active in his criminal empire, but Dasha is considered his soft spot. You might wonder why someone like Mogilevich hasn't been caught. The answer is simple: protection. Russia doesn't extradite its citizens, and Mogilevich has powerful friends who ensure he stays out of reach. The FBI has offered a $5 million reward for information leading to his capture, but so far no one's been brave enough, or foolish enough, to try. From one criminal mastermind to another, the next figure on our list is Dawood Ibrahim, the shadowy kingpin who rose from the streets of Mumbai to become one of the most feared criminals in the world. Dawood Ibrahim. Dawood Ibrahim is a name that sends shivers down spines across the globe. At 67 years old, this infamous mob boss is recognized as one of the richest and most powerful criminals in the world. Known by many titles: gangster, crime lord, and drug kingpin, Dawood has built an empire worth billions. As of 2015, Forbes estimated his net worth to be a staggering $6.7 billion, equivalent to around 55,741 crore rupees in Indian currency. And that was almost a decade ago. Since then, no official updates have been made, but it's likely that his wealth has only grown. This massive fortune comes from a mix of real estate investments, money laundering, drug trafficking, and other illegal ventures. Growing up in Mumbai's bustling Dongri area, Dawood was exposed to the chaotic streets, and by his teens, he was already involved in petty crimes like theft and fraud. He eventually dropped out of school and set his sights on becoming a big name in the underworld. By the 1970s, Dawood had founded his own criminal organization, famously known as D Company. What started as a small group soon grew into a global network involved in smuggling, extortion, and drug trafficking. Today, D Company is one of the most feared organized crime syndicates in the world. One of the secrets behind Dawood's massive wealth lies in his real estate investments. His property empire spans 16 countries across 5 continents, including India, the United Arab Emirates, the UK, Spain, Morocco, and even Australia. Reports suggest that he owns luxurious hotels, mansions, and commercial properties worth millions. For instance, in the UK, Dawood is said to own a hotel in Warwickshire and several properties across the Midlands. His right-hand man, Muhammad Iqbal Mirchi Memon, reportedly helped him build a vast property portfolio in southern England. In Dubai, Dawood has investments in high-end real estate projects, like the Al Khail Heights, where he is believed to operate through proxies. Intercepted phone calls revealed how Dawood micromanages these properties from Karachi, where he is reportedly under the protection of Pakistan's ISI agency. In one conversation, he discussed property sales and market trends with his business associate Yasir, showing just how hands-on he is despite being on the run. The Indian government has been cracking down on Dawood's assets in recent years. In 2020, they auctioned 6 of his properties in Maharashtra, including his ancestral land in Ratnagiri. These auctions are part of efforts under the Smugglers and Foreign Exchange Manipulators Forfeiture of Property Act, aiming to dismantle his empire piece by piece. However, this hasn't stopped Dawood from maintaining control over his operations. Despite the Indian and US governments designating him a global terrorist and placing a $25 million bounty on his head, he remains elusive. Dawood Ibrahim is infamous not just for his wealth, but also for his crimes. He is accused of orchestrating the 1993 Bombay bombings that killed hundreds and injured many more. Over the years, he has been linked to drug smuggling, match-fixing, extortion, and even terrorism. Despite these allegations, Dawood has managed to evade capture for decades. While India insists he resides in Karachi, Pakistan denies any knowledge of his whereabouts. This mystery has only added to his legend as one of the world's most wanted fugitives. Dawood Ibrahim's story is one of power, money and fear. But he's not the only crime boss who has made billions through illegal means. Next up is Anthony "Fat Tony" Salerno, another notorious figure whose influence and wealth earned him a spot among the richest crime lords in history. Anthony "Fat Tony" Salerno. Anthony Salerno, widely known as Fat Tony, is regarded as one of the wealthiest and most influential mobsters in the history of the American mafia. Operating primarily in East Harlem, Salerno's reach extended across New York City, where he played a central role in controlling the construction industry. Despite his unassuming reputation compared to more notorious mobsters, his influence and wealth made him a key figure in organized crime during the 20th century. Growing up in East Harlem, which boasted one of the largest Italian-speaking communities in the United States, young Anthony was shaped by the streets rather than traditional schooling. His parents, struggling to provide for their large family, couldn't focus on his education, leaving him to navigate the bustling and often dangerous environment of Little Italy. In his teenage years, Salerno became a member of the 116th Street Gang, led by Michael "Trigger Mike" Coppola. This gang controlled much of East Harlem's illegal gambling operations. By the mid-1930s, Salerno had established himself as a promising figure in the underworld, earning significant profits from gambling and loan sharking. By the 1950s, he reportedly controlled nearly all of Harlem's loan sharking operations, amassing an annual income of $50 million, a figure that translates to over $500 million today. Salerno's headquarters was the Palmer Boys Social Club in East Harlem, a modest front for his expansive criminal empire. Despite his wealth, he was known for his loyalty to Harlem and often supported the local community, employing people of various ethnic backgrounds based on their abilities rather than their heritage. Salerno expanded his criminal portfolio in the 1950s, opening a business called Metro Urban Music Company, which managed jukeboxes and gaming machines across New York City. His ventures in the entertainment sector only solidified his influence and income streams. Salerno also had connections to the world of professional boxing, including a relationship with legendary trainer Cus D'Amato, who mentored champions like Floyd Patterson and Mike Tyson. Salerno's involvement in boxing extended to financing matches, including the infamous 1959 bout between Floyd Patterson and Ingemar Johansson. While rumors suggested mafia influence in the fight's outcome, there was no concrete evidence linking Salerno to any wrongdoing. By the 1970s, Salerno shifted his focus from gambling to the construction industry. Partnering with influential figures from other mafia families, he controlled a vast network that demanded payments from nearly every contractor operating in New York City. His empire included interests in drywall plants, concrete companies, and major construction contracts, earning him tens of millions of dollars annually. In 1985, Salerno was indicted as part of the Commission Trial, a landmark case led by U.S. Attorney Rudy Giuliani aimed at dismantling the mafia's control over New York. Despite being portrayed as the Genovese family's boss, Salerno was more of a public figurehead, while the real power lay with Vincent "the Chin" Gigante. The trial revealed the mafia's extensive involvement in extortion, racketeering, and construction-related corruption. Salerno was convicted and sentenced to 100 years in prison, marking the end of his reign. Salerno's health declined during his incarceration. He suffered a stroke shortly after his release from a previous prison sentence and struggled with various ailments until his death in 1992. Let's look at Al Capone, another wealthy crime boss. Al Capone. Al Capone, also known as Scarface, was one of the most infamous gangsters in American history. Born Alphonse Gabriel Capone on January 17, 1899 in Brooklyn, New York, he was the child of Italian immigrants trying to make a life in America. But young Al wasn't cut out for the straight and narrow. Expelled from school at 14 for hitting a teacher, he quickly found himself drawn to the streets and the fast-paced life of crime. Capone started small. As a teenager, he joined the Five Points gang in New York, learning the ropes of organized crime. His first taste of real action came when he worked for a mob boss named Johnny Torrio. Torrio saw something in Capone and eventually brought him to Chicago, where the real money was being made. In Chicago, Capone worked as a bouncer in shady establishments, including brothels. When Torrio retired after an attempt on his life, he handed the reins to Capone, and the young gangster, just 26, became the boss of what would later be called the Chicago Outfit. Capone wasted no time turning Chicago into his playground. He ran gambling dens, brothels, and most famously, a massive bootlegging operation. Prohibition was in full swing, and alcohol was banned in the United States. Capone saw this as an opportunity to make a fortune, and make a fortune he did. At the height of his power, Capone's operations brought in an estimated $50 million a year from bootlegging alone. Gambling added another $25 million, and prostitution brought in about $10 million. That's about $1.5 billion in today's money. He was rolling in cash, and he wasn't shy about spending it. Capone bought luxurious homes, threw extravagant parties, and enjoyed the finest things life had to offer. Despite his violent methods, Capone tried to present himself as a man of the people. During the Great Depression, he opened one of the first soup kitchens in Chicago, feeding thousands of hungry people. Acts like this earned him a bit of goodwill, and some even saw him as a modern-day Robin Hood. But underneath the charitable gestures was a ruthless crime boss who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate anyone who stood in his way. Capone's violent streak came to a head with the St. Valentine's Day massacre in 1929. 7 members of a rival gang were lined up against a wall and gunned down in broad daylight. While Capone was never directly tied to the massacre, everyone knew he was behind it. The incident shocked the nation and painted Capone as a dangerous criminal, not the charming Robin Hood he tried to portray. For years, Capone seemed untouchable. He had police and politicians in his pocket, but his arrogance would be his undoing. Capone once bragged, "They can't collect legal taxes from illegal money." That statement came back to haunt him. The federal government, unable to pin him for his violent crimes, turned their focus to his finances. The IRS found that Capone had never paid taxes on his massive income. In 1931, he was convicted of tax evasion and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. Prison was the beginning of the end for Capone. He spent time in Alcatraz, the notorious island prison, where he began showing signs of neurosyphilis, a result of the untreated disease he contracted years earlier. His health deteriorated rapidly, and he became a shell of the man who once ruled Chicago. In 1939, after serving almost 8 years, Capone was released early due to his failing health. He retreated to his mansion in Florida, where he spent his final years. On January 25, 1947, Capone died of a heart attack after suffering a stroke. He was just 48 years old. Capone's immense wealth is still a topic of fascination. Some say he buried millions of dollars in hidden locations, but no one has ever found it. His grandniece even claimed he couldn't remember where he hid his money after being released from prison. Whether that's true or not, Capone's legacy as one of history's richest and most notorious criminals remains intact. Next up, let's dive into the life of another criminal mastermind whose name is equally feared and revered, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's life sounds like something straight out of a movie. He started in a poor farming family in Sinaloa, Mexico, and grew into one of the most powerful drug lords the world has ever seen. His nickname, El Chapo, means shorty in Spanish because of his small height, but his reputation was anything but small. Guzman built a drug empire so massive that it made him a billionaire and one of the most talked about criminals in history. El Chapo's fortune mainly came from drug trafficking. He smuggled massive amounts of cocaine, meth, marijuana, and heroin into the United States and Europe, which made him billions. He didn't just send a few packages here and there. He ran an operation so big that it supplied more drugs to the US than any other cartel in history. He was known for using clever tactics, like digging long tunnels near borders to transport drugs secretly. These tunnels had lighting and ventilation, showing how serious he was about his operations. Guzman also used private planes, submarines, and even trucks disguised as regular delivery vehicles to move his product. El Chapo is believed to have had homes on every beach in Mexico, ranches in almost every state, and luxury cars. One of his beachside villas in Acapulco even had a private zoo with lions, tigers, and panthers. He reportedly rode a train around the zoo to look at his exotic animals. Then there were his guns. Guzman didn't just carry ordinary weapons, he had diamond-encrusted pistols. One of them had a Black Panther design made out of diamonds, and another featured a white tiger. His flashy lifestyle made him a legend in the world of crime. In 2009, his wealth was pegged at around $1 billion. However, some experts believe the Sinaloa cartel, which he led, made over $30 billion annually at its peak. But here's the catch. It's not like Guzman had a big bank account with his name on it. Most of his wealth was tied up in his cartel's operations, money laundering, paying henchmen, and buying things like planes and submarines to keep the business running. Despite all his riches and power, El Chapo's life was far from glamorous toward the end. He was first arrested in 1993 in Guatemala and sentenced to prison in Mexico. But Guzman wasn't the kind of guy to stay locked up. He bribed guards and escaped in 2001. For years, he lived on the run, hiding in mountains and remote areas. He was caught again in 2014, but escaped in 2015 through a tunnel dug straight into his prison cell. This escape made international headlines, proving how resourceful and determined he was. But in 2016, Mexican authorities recaptured him after a shootout and handed him over to the US. In 2019, El Chapo was found guilty of drug trafficking, money laundering, and murder. He's now serving a life sentence at ADX Florence in Colorado, the most secure prison in the United States. Now the US government is trying to seize his fortune, but finding it isn't easy. Unlike a regular business, drug cartels don't keep receipts or bank statements. Prosecutors argue they don't need to prove he has the money right now, they just need to show he once had it. And there you have it, a glimpse into the lives of the richest and most notorious crime bosses in history. Curious to know about mafia bosses with incredible wealth in prisons? Check our video, The Wealthiest Mafia Boss in Italian Prisons.